A while back, I posted a video about taking your PNGTuber model and pushing it into Live2D, but I got a ton of questions asking about animations, expressions, and eye blinking, and so I figured now would be a good time to make a part 2 and go over some of this more advanced stuff. Today we'll be making a new Live2D PNGTuber model that has automatic blinking, an animation loop, a couple of expression toggles, and mouth tracking. Because this is going to be a more complex tutorial, there's going to be a ton of information, and I know you all probably, like me, have severely damaged attention spans from eternal short-form content consumption. So I will be putting this little goober down in the bottom left of the screen anytime the information is extra learning material and not necessarily directly relevant to the tutorial. I completely understand wanting to learn things quickly and easily and not really wanting to get into the nitty-gritty, but I do also want people to be able to have permanent Live2D skills from learning things the right way. Before we start, I just wanted to mention that this is not really a common thing people do. There are tons of tutorials for apps that are actually dedicated to PNG tubing, like PNGTuber Plus or VTube Mini, even just built-in OBS PNGTubers, so please consider those when making your model, as those are intended to be used for PNGTubers. VTubeStudio does have a lot of new features like built-in Twitch integration, video effects, and stream collabs, and it does also have the benefit of being regularly updated and having a pretty large community. I just want you to be aware that VTubeStudio is primarily for full Live2D models like mine. If you don't want to take advantage of those extra features, you should probably do the easier option. This video is, much like my first one, going to be from an absolute beginner perspective, so I will have my keyboard inputs on screen and will hold your hand along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. You will need an art program that supports PSD files, Live2D Cubism, VTubeStudio, and your PNGTuber art. No webcam required, but you do need a mic to be able to register your audio input. I'm not going to walk you through installing all of these. Links will be down in the description. Now let's first talk about your art file. You will need a file in a Photoshop document format that has your PNGTuber separated into pieces. If you don't have any art, don't worry, I will be providing a Photoshop document of my Picrew, so that can be an option for you, but more on that later. For this specific video, your Photoshop layers should be comprised of a base sprite, mouth closed, mouth open, or you can also include AIUEO or AIUEO, however you want to say it, eyes open, eyes closed. And if you want to do any of the extra fancy stuff, you'll also need some form of expression, so maybe some blush, some stars, or an asset that you want to animate. If you have art commissioned, please make sure that your artist is okay with manipulating it in Live2D. Do not do this tutorial without your artist's explicit consent beforehand. If you're an artist, you can draw all of this yourself, but I understand that not everyone is, so it's best to have a PNGTuber commissioned or make your own. If those options aren't for you, like I said, I will be offering my entire Picrew in PSD form for you, free of charge. Although if you're feeling nice and want me to be able to live, you can also give me money, maybe, please. If you go this route, you'll want to customize a file for your needs. If you already have art prepared, you can go ahead and skip ahead. Otherwise, I will quickly show you how to customize and edit that Photoshop document. When you pick up the item on Coffee, there will be 3 separate files available for download, and make sure that you download the one that is intended for use with the software that you will be using. This is because there's different ways to recolor items in different softwares, and if you're new to that, you'll want to grab the right one so you can reference the samples that I include in the file. To customize a model, I would recommend planning things out in the actual Picrew first, because it's easier to click buttons than it is to scroll through like however the many layers this is. When you have things planned out, scroll through the Photoshop document and pick all of the layers that you want. Make sure to grab your eyes closed option, your eyes open option, and all of your mouth options as well. You'll see that within the folder, I also have a specific mouth section dedicated to AIOU or AIUEO, which you can use if you want your audio input to actually track the vowels in your voice. Now we just need to adjust all of the colors. There's 2 main ways to do recolors. The first one is to fill a layer with a color and set the blending mode to multiply. This will do the job for the most part. However, in some cases, if you want to do something like lighten the eyes up, which have a black eyelash attached to them, you'll need to use a gradient map to maintain that black eyelash color. Feel free to adjust the model as needed. Here I am on stream adjusting my Picrew to match my needs. I'm also doing some resizing, recoloring, and additional texturing. All of that is okay if you want to do it. Just please, please, please. I ask that you follow my terms of use, which is mostly just to give credit for the base somewhere obvious in your social media and not to use it in with or in association with AI, NFTs, or cryptocurrency. When you're done, I would highly recommend deleting all of the extra layers because you don't need them and it will just add clutter to your file. Whether you've made your own PNGs, commission them, or if you're using mine, you will still have to collect them all within one Photoshop document. So if you have your PNGTuber in the form of multiple PNGs, now would be the time to combine them into a single document. And once your Photoshop document's ready to go, we can go ahead and start rigging. First things first, let's take our Photoshop document file, click and drag and drop it into Live2D. It should automatically generate your file, and you'll be able to see all of your art ready to work with. Before we do anything, let's set up 2 hotkeys that will be helping us out later. To do that, we will be pressing Control, Alt, Shift, K, and that will bring up the hotkeys menu. Here we're going to go into the Show section, scroll down, and under Hide Selected State, we're going to bind this to H. You can bind it to whatever you want, but H is intuitive for me because H for hide. And the next section we'll be adding a hotkey in is going to be under the Modeling section. We have to scroll very far down until we get to Temporary Path Deformation. And here I have this hotkey set to Alt 3, but you're welcome to set it to anything that you want to set it to. And then hit OK. Now that we have our hotkey set up, let's go ahead and generate mesh. If you click on any of your layers, you'll notice that each layer has a bounding box around it with 4 vertices. And these 4 vertices currently represent your mesh, which is a simple box. The reason why we don't want this square mesh is because if I were to create a hypothetical warp deformer, don't do this by the way, this is just for learning purposes. If I bent this warp deformer, the hair you can see would move on a plane. It looks very boxy. And as a matter of fact, if I bent where I know the top 2 vertices are up here, it would actually bend the entire Artmesh like a piece of paper. But we want this to move with a bit of roundness and volume. And so when you do an automatic mesh generation, which creates a bunch of polygons or vertices, whatever you want to call them, when we move the warp deformer, it will move elegantly and with a roundness to it. If you zoom in up close, you can see where some of these corners start to happen, particularly in this area here and here. And if we look, we can see that this is because that's where there are some vertices making a triangular shape here. If we pull it out too far, you can start to see the boxiness of it. And so usually there is a sweet spot between where you have enough vertices to make it look smooth, but not too many to where it'll cause optimization problems. That being said, we're going to generate an automatic mesh for everything. In general, you don't want to generate automatic mesh for a new model, especially if it's a full Live2D model that you're going to be using for VTubing, like for example, the model that I'm using right now. However, since this is a smaller model and your PC is likely able to handle it, we're just going to go ahead and generate a standard mesh for everything. To do that, we'll select an item at the bottom of the list, hold Shift, and left click to select all of the items in your Artmesh list. Then we're going to go ahead and hit this automatic mesh generation button at the top, and we'll set it to standard. Instantly, you can see there are tons of little triangles everywhere. And this is where that hotkey we made earlier comes in handy. Whenever you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of bullshit that's on your screen, you can go ahead and hit H, and it will hide all of the vertices, warp deformers, etc. to make visualizing your work a bit easier. Just hit H again to bring it back at any time. Now we're going to do our parameter setup. The only parameters that we want to keep are going to be the ILOpen and IROpen parameters. So let's scroll to the bottom of the parameter list, select hair move back, scroll up, hold Shift, and select eyeball X. Then we're going to hold Control and add on IR smile and IL smile. Then we'll right click and hit the delete button and select OK. Now we're going to add in the parameters that we will be using for the rest of this tutorial. To do that, press the plus button down here in the parameters section. And first we're going to add our voice parameters. So let's add voice volume first. This is going to go from 0 to 1 with a default of 0. And we can right click this parameter and hit replicate to make a similar parameter, then right click the new one and hit edit. And we're going to change this to frequency. Now we're going to add in a parameter that will be for our main model bounce. So we're going to press the plus icon. And this is going to go from -1 to 1 with a default of 0. We're also going to add in 2 hair rigging parameters. And this is going to be from -1 to 1, but this is going to be a blend shape. So make sure to check this box here. And we'll do the same thing as last time, right click and replicate. We're going to edit this to be the second physics parameter. You'll notice that for blend shapes, you'll actually have a box shape here instead of the regular round shape so that you can differentiate them easier. If you did the last tutorial, you'll probably remember that when we rigged our voice volume parameter, we had 2 keyforms, one on the left side and one on the right side, and in between, Live2D will blend these 2 keyforms together. Obviously, the in-between is undesirable, and so in the last tutorial, we circumvented this by making the threshold for voice volume very low, such that it would completely avoid the blending. And that's because I just didn't want you to have to rig something super complicated. But since this is the more advanced tutorial, we're gonna rig this in a way so that we don't have to worry about doing that in VTubeStudio later. So let's start by rigging the right eye. First, select all of your right eye mesh. So for me, this is the sclera, the iris, and the lash. And I'm going to select the IR open parameter and hit the Edit Keyforms Manually button. This will bring up a menu where you can more selectively choose where you want your keyforms to go. I'm going to place one at 1, one at 0.3, and one at 0.25. But we actually want this 0.25 keyform to be closer to 0.3, so I'm going to double click this and adjust it to 0.29 so that they're very, very close together. Then hit OK. Because we're trying to avoid that blending, what we're doing here is we're making the switch between the two parameters happen in a very, very small frame so that it's almost invisible to human eyes. So at 1, we want our eye open to be visible. At 0.3, we also want it to be visible, so no changes are needed here. And then at the 0.29 keyform, we're going to make the opacity set to 0. By the way, if at any time you have a hard time differentiating between the two of these keyforms, I understand it's hard to see because it's very, very small, you can either stretch the screen out so that you can see them more clearly, or you can type into the box 0.29 and hit enter. And although it will go back to saying 0.3, it is at 0.29 now that you've manually typed it in. That being said, at the 0.29 keyform, we're going to change the opacity to 0. And now we can finally move over to the 0 point and add in a keyform. Now you can see that if we move back and forth along the parameter, the eye flashes visible and invisible very, very quickly. And if you actually type in the bar 0.295, the midway point between 0.29 and 0.3, you can see that the opacity is still phasing out. It's just happening in such a small time frame that it's barely visible to us. Now let's do the same for the eye closed. So select your main lash line for the eye closed and your main lash, select IR open parameter, edit keyforms manually, and we're going to do the inverse. So we're starting at 0 this time, and once again 0.25, 0.3, and adjust the 0.25, don't do what I just did, adjust the 0.25 to be 0.29 and hit OK. Now mine is not visible right now because I actually have the art layer invisible, so I'm going to toggle that on. Opacity should be 100 at the 0 mark, then at 0.29, also opacity should be 100. And here's where the switch occurs. So at the 0.3 mark, we want to take it down to 0. And then once again, move all the way to the end and add in a keyform. And now you can see the blink happens very quickly. And if we type in 0.295 again in the bar, we can see that there is still the blending where you can see both at the same time where they're blending into each other, but once again, not really visible to us because it happens so quickly. Now we have to do the same for the left eye. So just follow the same thing that you just did, except we're going to be rigging it on IL open instead of IR open. And now we have a functional blink for both eyes, the left eye and the right eye. Before we can view this in action, we will have to do one quick setting. Click on the hamburger menu here and scroll down to the settings for eye blinking and lip sync section. Click that, and we're going to check the box for eye blinking for eye left open and eye right open. Then hit OK. And now we should be able to go to modeling, physics settings, and we can see our eyes blinking automatically. Very cute. Now we're going to work on our voice volume parameter. In the last tutorial, I worked in the pro version free trial, but this time I'm trying to avoid the pro version free trial so you don't have to use your trial period, which means we're working in the free version. In the pro version, you have access to the multiply and screen color options, which we don't in the free version, and these allow you to darken and brighten your model based off of a color input. So the way that we're going to circumvent this is we're going to use this random square layer that you've probably noticed. It's called layer 1. I'm going to rename this. And I'm going to take this box layer and I'm going to put it all the way at the top of my model. Now we're going to set this to multiply. It'll give you this pop-up and you can hit don't show again and hit OK. So instead of using the multiply feature, we're adding a layer of color that we're using to multiply over everything manually, which means that we have to clip this to the shape of the entire model. To do that, we'll go into our parts menu, select everything in our model and make sure to hold Control and deselect any folders or deformers that you have such that you are only selecting the Artmesh. Now we can press Control C, which doesn't seem like it's doing anything, but it does copy not only the actual Artmesh, but also the name of the Artmesh, its ID. So now we can go to the Darken box, and where it says clipping ID here, we can press Control, Paste, and Enter. And that will make sure to clip that box only to the shape of your model and not in the background. Now with the Darken box selected, we can go to Voice Volume and add 2 keyforms. And at Voice Volume 0, we are not speaking, so we want the Darken box to be visible. And at Voice Volume equals 1, we want the Darken box to go away because we are speaking, and we want the model to be brightened up, so we'll change the opacity to 0 here. And now we have a simple darken and brighten animation. Now we can move on to the mouth rigging. Currently, I only have my standard mouth viewable, but as you can see over here in my mouth folder, I have all of these other options for A, E, I, O, and U to represent different mouth shapes for when I'm speaking. I'm gonna toggle them all on so it will look like a bit of a cluster for a moment here. Let's take all of our mouth shapes, starting from the bottommost one, holding Shift and selecting the topmost one, and then create a new warp deformer. Just like with our eye open parameter, we're going to do a similar strategy to make our mouth open and close for voice volume. So let's do the mouth open first. With your mouth open voice volume warp deformer selected, select the voice volume parameter and hit edit keyforms manually. We're going to add keyforms at 1, 0.5, and 0.45, and then change to 0.45 to 0.49. At the 0.49 mark, this is where we're going to start switching back to the mouth being closed, so I'm going to pull the opacity down to 0. And now you'll see there's an instant switch here between the mouth being closed and the mouth being open. Now we can add our last keyform at 0, and now we'll do the inverse for the mouth closed. I'm going to select my mouth closed, Artmesh, select voice volume parameter, edit keyforms manually, add one at 0, 0.45, and 0.5. Switch this to 0.49. Hit OK. And then at the 0.5 mark, we're going to change the opacity to 0, and then add in our last keyform. Now the mouth will switch between mouth open and mouth closed instantaneously. Now we have to do the very complicated task of doing that same process except 5 times over to change in between each shape of the mouth. Since we have 5 mouth shapes, we're going to need to split up the parameter from 0 to 1 into 5 equal chunks, which comes out to each mouth shape being present for a segment that is about 0.2 long. So let's start with our A. Make sure that you have your A mouth selected. Select the voice frequency parameter and hit edit keyforms manually. And here we will start at 0, 0.15, 0.2, and we're going to change to 0.15 to 0.19, then hit OK. At 0.19, it's still visible, and at 0.2, we're going to change the visibility to 0. Then let's toggle on our I. Select the I mouth, select voice frequency parameter, 0.15, 0.2, 0.35, and 0.4. Then we're going to edit this to be 0.19, and this to be 0.39, and hit OK. At 0.19, we'll toggle this to 0. Then it turns on at 0.2. At 0.39, it's still on. And at the 0.4 mark, this is where we will be switching to O. So we're going to switch it off, toggle the opacity to 0. And now we continue this process on for each mouth shape. Toggle on O, select the O mouth, voice frequency, edit keyforms, 39, 0.4, 0.55, 0.6, swap, zero, visible, visible, not visible. U, select U. For the last one, we'll do 0.75, 0.8, and 1. Edit 0.79 to, or 0.75 to be 0.79. Sorry, lots of numbers in my mouth right now. And hit OK. And lastly, change this opacity back to 0. Now I can see the fast switch between keyforms. You probably noticed that I'm only doing chunks at a time and I'm avoiding adding in these other keyforms. And that's because Live2D does require you to have keyforms at the beginning and end point. It can cause weird problems with your Artmesh later down the line if you don't always have a keyform at the beginning and end of each parameter. However, any keyform that you add in will follow the previous keyform's shape. And so the reason why I do this is because if I were to add this keyform before I change the opacity to 0 at this point, then it would follow the opacity and I would have to go in and change that one as well. Whereas now I can just go in and select add keyform and it will copy the 0 opacity of the previous keyform here. So now we can go back in and quickly add in the end keyframes for all of these. So for A, add it at 0.1. For I, you'll need them at both 0.1 and 0. Same thing for O. Same thing for U. And E, we already added that last one there. So now you shouldn't have to worry about any of the errors it'll throw at you if you don't have a keyform on both ends of the parameter. Good work, you now have a functional mouth and eye rig for your Live2D PNGTuber. And the next video will be going over hair rigging as well as physics. Links will be in the description for all of the videos in the series. See you in the next one. Bye!